Today, we're going to talk about a country that, on paper, probably shouldn't have existed. But for one brief, shining moment, it became one of the most successful nations in the world. This is the story of the Impossible Republic.
So let's start with a really basic question. How is a country born? Usually it's after a long war, or some big treaty, a formal declaration. But this story, it's a little different.
This country was born from the ashes of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But here's the kicker. It declared its own existence before World War I was even finished, and before the empire it was breaking away from had even officially died.
And that brings us to our first idea here. This was a nation truly before its time. The timing of all this is absolutely everything. Just look at this timeline. It shows you just how wild this whole thing was. Czechoslovakia declares independence on October 28th, but the empire it's leaving, it doesn't officially dissolve for another 3 days, and it doesn't even surrender to the Allies until November 3rd. They were literally creating a country from inside a collapsing empire in a total race against the clock.
And you have to understand, this wasn't some top-down decision made by a bunch of guys in a smoke-filled room. No. While the diplomats were still haggling over details in Geneva, the people of Prague just took to the streets. They heard a rumor about an Austrian armistice, figured that meant the monarchy was over, and just declared themselves independent. A country born right there on the pavement.
Okay, so that's how it started. But how did they actually build the thing? Well, this is where the story gets truly bizarre. It's really a case of building a country completely backwards.
Think about it. Normally, you declare independence, you form a government, you try to get other countries to recognize you, and then you build an army. Czechoslovakia did it in almost the exact opposite order. Step 1, create an army in October 1917, a whole year before you're a country. Step 2, get other countries on board in April 1918. Step 3, form a temporary government just 2 weeks before independence. And only then, as the very last step, do you actually declare you exist. It's completely upside down.
And this one point really just drives home the absurdity of it all. They had an army of 60,000 for a country that didn't exist yet. This was the Czechoslovakian Legion, formed over in Russia with the consent of the Tsar's government. A real fighting army for a nation that was, at that point, still just an idea.
And believe me, the rush didn't stop there. They had to create a government like yesterday. So they needed a parliament, but there was no time for new elections. Their solution? They just took the results from the last imperial election, which had been held 7 years earlier, back in 1911. It was this incredibly pragmatic we'll-figure-it-out-later move that just shows how desperate they were to get things up and running. Okay, so beyond all that political paradox, the birth of Czechoslovakia held this massive economic surprise.
Well, this leads us to maybe the most shocking part of the story. They instantly became Europe's hidden industrial giant.
I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. What actually happens when, by a quirk of fate, you inherit the entire industrial heart of a dying empire? Well, you get this. The new nation of Czechoslovakia made up only about 21% of the old empire's land, but it inherited a staggering 70 to 80% of its entire industrial capacity. All the best bits, all the factories, they were now inside this new country.
And what did that mean on a global scale? It meant that almost overnight, this brand new nation was the 10th most industrialized country on the entire planet. Insane.
And we're not just talking about one or two things. They were a genuine powerhouse. They had world-leading industries in textiles and footwear. Their arms industry, the famous Škoda Works, was pretty much unrivaled in Europe. They completely dominated high-end porcelain and glassware, and of course, being Czechs and Slovaks, they had over 40% of the old empire's breweries. They were an economic juggernaut from day one. So what's the bottom line? Well, by 1929, just before the Great Depression hit, the average person in Czechoslovakia was wealthier than the average person in Germany, France, or even Italy. Their currency was one of the strongest in Europe. This wasn't some fledgling nation, it was a world leader. But a country isn't just about factories and money, right? It's about people. So who are the minds behind this impossible project? Well, let's meet the founders and talk about a tragedy. Okay, so there was 3 main architects who made this whole thing happen. First, you had Tomáš Masaryk. He was the philosopher president, the great unifier. Then there was Edvard Beneš, the absolute master diplomat. And crucially, a key Slovak's co-founder, who was the symbol of unity for the other half of this new nation.
And when I say Beneš was a master diplomat, I'm not kidding. He was so good at maneuvering at the post-war peace talks that his peers, the other top diplomats from around the globe, considered him one of the 10 best in the world. He was absolutely essential in making the world accept this new country.
And the third member of this trio was maybe the most colorful of them all, Milan R. Štefanik. He was a Slovak, a general in the French army, a respected astronomer, and a bit of an adventurer. He was the military mastermind, the guy who organized those legions we talked about and secured crucial support on the world stage. But this incredible story of triumph, it also has a tragic final act. An ending that's marked by mystery and a great loss that would echo for decades. The date is May 4th, 1919, and it marks the beginning of the end for one of the nation's founders. General Štefanik, the national hero, is finally coming home. After 6 long years in exile, he's flying back to take his rightful place as the Minister of War. The entire nation is holding its breath, waiting for him. But he never made it. Just minutes before landing near Bratislava, his plane mysteriously crashed. The hero, who fought so hard to create this new state, he never got to set foot on its free soil. And his death was so much more than a personal tragedy. It had this deep, symbolic meaning, especially for the Slovak people. Many of them felt that with Štefanik gone, the strongest voice who would have fought for their equality in the new, often Czech-dominated state had been buried with him. And so we're left with this massive, unanswerable question. What if that plane had landed safely? How different would the history of Czechoslovakia, and maybe all of Central Europe, have been? It's a single moment in time that really might have changed everything.